Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Doing Business in webinar. I'm very, very excited because I'm a Wolves fan, Tony. It's the one we've all been waiting for. It's Doing Business in Portugal. You know, I feel like I've got some sort of like shared citizenship. I feel like I'm half Portuguese being a Wolves fan these days. We're really, really excited about the next 90 minutes. As many of you who've been on the webinar before know, this is a joint collaboration between ourselves at the Football Transfer Forum and the European Football Agents Association. Good morning, Tony. How are you? I see your Christmas tree hasn't grown since we last saw you.
Ryan, I won't have you criticising my Christmas tree.
Okay.
It's actually quite big. It's just quite far away. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to today's webinar. Not just because there seems to be a new colony in Wolverhampton, a Portuguese territory that they didn't know existed until just recently. But also just because it's a really, really interesting transfer market. You know, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the Football Transfer Forum and what we do, but really the Portuguese transfer market is such an exciting one. You know, when we started this Doing Business in series, we were going to do just the big 5 leagues, but there was two or three really good reasons to include Portugal in that. And one of them is that when FIFA looked at transfers over the summer, well, the extended summer that we had as a transfer window, you know, Portugal was up there with Spain and England. They were in 3rd place in terms of the number of international transfers that they concluded in and out of Portugal. So that's really good reason to include them in the series. The other one is the Portuguese clubs, and I know we've got Patricia here from Sporting Clube. The Portuguese clubs are very good at selling players, and they were the 6th best in the world in terms of incoming international transfer fees coming into their clubs this summer. So the big 5 were there, and then Portugal was right behind them, you know, in 6th place. So yeah, Wolves is a great reason to be doing this, but also the strength and the excitement in that transfer market.
Absolutely. And as always on this series, we've been really fortunate to have been joined by 2 unbelievable guests. So we really thank them in advance for their time. First of all, Tony, he's already mentioned you, Patricia Silva Lopez, Senior In-House Legal Counsel at Sporting Clube de Portugal. Good morning, Patricia. How are you?
Good morning.
You okay?
Here with you. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, it looks delightful where you are. It's bitterly cold up here in the northeast. So we look forward to speaking to you in some detail a little bit later on. And also Ricardo Cardoso, sports lawyer at Portuguese practice at CMB. Good morning, Ricardo. How are you?
Good morning, Ryan. Fine.
Fantastic. Everything okay with you?
Yeah, of course.
Excellent. Great to have you with us. A bit of housekeeping before we get going, guys. As you can probably see on the screen, Ali from the European Football Agents Association is with us as well, and she's going to be managing the chat and question and answer section on the Zoom. So any comments you've got, please feel free to get them in the chat or the question and answer section, and we will certainly have time to go through those a little bit later on. Ali will also be providing sort of relevant links both to the individuals involved and some of the content out of today's talk on the chat as well. So fantastic. Let's just get back into the slides, and we'll have a little look at what we're going to be up to this morning. So we're going to kick off with Ricardo in a short period of time, and we're really going to get through the sort of nitty gritty in terms of what it is to be an agent in Portugal, with Ricardo leaning on, of course, all of his expertise as a sports lawyer in Portugal. We're then fingers crossed, going to be joined by Roberto Branco Martins from the European Football Agents Association. Tony, really dynamic time for EFA at the moment. So much going on with the negotiations with FIFA. We'd heard from Roberto a couple of weeks ago about some of the potential changes. So it's going to be really interesting, isn't it, to see if there's any more meat on the bone there.
Yeah, and I know from speaking to Roberto and the European Football Agents Association that they're right in the thick of it in terms of putting forward the agents' views to the new changes that FIFA are looking to put in. So they're actually participating in some respect and have received quite a lengthy document from FIFA just outlining the plans that are afoot for new agent regulations. And obviously that'll affect everybody, whether you're working in Portugal, England, or wherever. So that'll be really interesting.
Absolutely. And then we're gonna be able to speak to Patricia. I'm going to leave the full introduction until we speak to Patricia a little bit later. But it's great to have her with us. She's, one of the most experienced legal practitioners in European football. Has been at Sporting for over 20 years. Also a member, sits as the club's representative often at the European Club Association as well. So it's going to be absolutely fantastic to get her personal insight into how she sees the landscape of Portuguese football as well. And as I always promise, we'll have plenty of time for your questions at the end as well. So get them in early, get them in the question box, get them in the chat box. Ali will manage that as she does, and then hopefully we'll be able to get through as much as possible. But let's get cracking, and we're starting with Ricardo. I normally like to get a dodgy photo, Ricardo, but that's a good solid photograph. That looks professionally taken. Good stuff. I know you're going to start off with a small presentation, Ricardo. So I'll hand the reins over to you.
Okay, so thanks, Ryan, Tony, Patricia. Good morning again. When I look to this invitation, I think the most important thing is to put practical issues to all the audience and some suggestions and some advices for the agents mainly who wants to come to do business in Portugal and the players too. So I will make a brief presentation, but only with the short items and the main ideas. Okay. So I will share. Okay, I think it's okay.
Perfect.
So for big pictures, importance of registering, the registration process, the main features of the regime, and suggestions and advices. So the most important thing when the agent is probably be working with the Portuguese market, the most important thing is to register on the Portuguese Football Federation. I'm saying this because in some sorry, just okay. So the importance of registering as an intermediary. I think it's two good reasons to do that. One of them is related with the relation with the player himself. The player himself, because we only have a valid signed contract with an intermediary with valid registration on the Portuguese Federation. We might discuss legally what type of invalidity we can get from this absence. But when the agents came to this country, it's essential to be comfortable with these relations with the player to get a registration under the Portuguese Federation. So nevertheless, in the practical way, it's essential to be registered before signing the intermediation contract and signing the intermediation contract and the sporting contract with the player, because there is some issues and some obligations and some communications to make. I will only say it has been admitted in Portugal that we can sign the sporting contract not with the registration, the final registration, but with the beginning of the registration process. And so this is important because sometimes the timing of the businesses is too fast, and the registration process is not so fast. So the agents can initiate the process and then sign the contracts and later on get the final registration. I'm saying that because in Portugal we don't have an online platform to make the upload of the documents. So and the documents needs to be on the Portuguese language. So sometimes it's not easy for the foreign agents and the foreign investors. So I will say, first of all, the importance related to the players, but also with the clubs, because the clubs is obliged to put on a sporting contract if the player is or the club is represented or not by an intermediary or an agent. I will talk as an agent or an intermediary because I think it's not the point on this webinar to look from changes from agent to intermediary. So the club, I know that the club may claim against a situation after the signing of the sporting contract if the agent is not registered on the Portuguese Federation. And if we look at the numbers, so this is the first impressions about why this is so important to get the registration. But the numbers show, I'm only sharing some numbers. I think Tony will do it too, because if you look at the first, you will see that in Portugal we have commissions, a little small value with commissions paid under the players. And if you look, there is an increasing amount when the commissions are paying under the club. So this is a particular situation that is linked with the prohibition in Portugal to the double or triple representation. So normally, we know that from our practice, normally the players won't pay the commission, and it will be the club, normally the buyer club who pays. And the first one that the first numbers that I'm sharing shows that. But it's really interesting if you look of the importance of this small country on the numbers that FIFA shared latest 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. And if you look, the engaging of Portugal is the third, just after England and Italy. So this is a small country, but with a huge potential to do business in sport and in football in particular. So let's get on the registration process. I think the main ideas, I will not tell what the framework says particularly. I think the most important thing is to put the big ideas, the most important things. And I just said before, there's no online platform for one hand, and sometimes this is difficult to manage by the agents, mainly with foreign agents. So registration may be applied as a natural person or a company. In Portugal, there is only a specific issue, is that when the company wants to register as an agent, his legal representative, his director, normally needs to be registered under the Portuguese law. But the main thing is you need to get the criminal record. I think this is almost the same at the several countries in Europe. But you need to get a copy of a liability insurance policy. So this is important, and this is the interesting point on the framework in Portugal, because one of the changes of the new regime on FIFA's basis maintain this kind of obligation. And I think it's an important issue, mainly for the protection of the agents, because the activity can have some difficulties and some problems with clients. So I think this is an interesting point and a favorable point on the Portuguese regime. There is some declarations about activities that you cannot do when you are agent. I will not talk about that. I think this is the normal way. The documents in Portuguese and always the agents need to pay 1,000 years fee to register as an intermediary in Portugal. So the registration is valid for one season, and this is, I think, is important to explain this, because when you came to Portugal, probably I think in UK is different. In Spain, I think is different too, but in UK, I think it is valid for 1 year and not for a season. So if you came to Portugal, for example, November 2020, you only will get valid registration until the end of the season. So it's not a year. Of course, the Portuguese Federation receives the same fee, but this is only a particular situation.
Ricardo,
yeah.
It's quite expensive, €1,000 per season.
Oh, sorry about that.
It is, isn't it? No,
yeah.
no. In England, it's what, £600, so that'll be about €700 maybe, just short of, and then it goes down for the second year and subsequent years. So it's quite expensive.
And if you take in account the validity of one season, it can be much more expensive, because you have 500 to pay also the insurance policy.
The insurance policy, yeah. So Ricardo,
yeah.
Ricardo, the fee doesn't go down in the second year. It's €1,000 per year.
It's per year. We thought that if you look at the new ideas of FIFA, I think it's cheaper than the registration in Portugal nowadays. So I think this is very expensive. But when you need to come to Portugal and do business, I think this is not the key point to the agents.
Ricardo, we haven't heard a figure coming out of FIFA yet. We may do with Roberto. Have you heard a figure coming out of FIFA?
Yeah, of course. I read some confidential.
We love confidential.
That
We love
everyone
confidential
knows.
stuff, Ricardo.
Yeah, I cannot talk about confidential things, but all of us have that kind of framework. I know the name is confidential working draft. I think this is, but I think this is one of the important things with the contracts. I will tell you later. Is to get a clause to, because we have a 2 years maximum contract, and then if we sign today an intermediation contract in Portugal, you need to prevent the new framework. I know in the new framework FIFA prevents these situations, but at the end of the day, I think the agents needs to be cautious about this and put some clauses to protect themselves, because this situation, these changes, mostly about fees, because in Portugal is another main ideas that I want to share with you. There is not a cap on commissions. They are only suggesting 5% of a gross value of the contract, but we don't have that kind of limitation. And for sure, this is the key point of the new regulation that it comes in force. So.
Sorry, Ricardo, just before you move on to your next slide, if you could just go back to that slide just a second, just so we could just for the viewers, in terms of the insurance, is the insurance bought through the Portuguese FA, or is that something that agents need to go out to the market for? You can
bring a different country insurance policy.
Okay, right.
And you can use this insurance policy in other countries, like I don't know, Brazil, because Brazil the limit is not the same on the value.
Yeah.
But you can use a UK insurance policy, a German or a French. This is important. So the main features of the regime, I think I choose only 7 points because I think this is the most important. So in the Portuguese FA regulation, the rules governing the hiring of the service of an intermediary. So we can represent players or clubs with the purpose of signing a sporting contract, renew a sporting contract, sign a transfer agreement between clubs. So this is the object of the service that an agent can provide under the Portuguese law. And they are being defined intermediary as a natural or legal person. I already said this, with a legal capacity against remuneration or free charge, represents players or clubs in negotiations to sign a sporting contract. And that is only possible. And this is only possible in Portugal, representing one of the parties. Okay, so this is other main goals of the Portuguese regime, because you cannot, on the same negotiation to sign contract, represent clubs and the players, as we have I think in UK we have this kind of situation, and Spain too.
Ricardo,
yeah.
Just on the point of the minors, because I think
yeah.
You can expand on the minors a little.
No, we have a total prohibition of representation of minors.
So if a 16 or 17-year-old is signing in a Portuguese club, how does he get any any help with that signing? How does that work?
Yeah, normally on practice, the agent works with the player, but the club, this prohibition is only to represent the minor. Is not prohibited to represent the club to convince the minor and his parents to sign a professional contract.
Okay.
In my opinion, if the player can sign a professional contract with 16, which is in the most cases the most important contract, sporting contract on his life, I don't understand why he cannot be represented by an intermediary and sign a contract with him. And look, in Portugal, probably we more than other countries, we should realize that is very, very important, because we have lots of young players signing professional contracts at the 16. Yeah. So what I'm sometimes I think we need to be some careful about these kind of contracts. But in Portugal nowadays, the clubs sign a representation contract with the agent of a minor player. This is not, in my opinion, this is not the correct way to do these things. But I think the rule as it has is not protecting the minors. I know in the new regulations we gonna get to this point again, but now we have the total prohibition of representation of minors and the prohibition of the double or triple representation. So this is why I show at the first slide or second the numbers. That's why we have so just a few amount of commissions paid under the representation of the player, because on the Portuguese framework we have total prohibition, representation of minors, prohibition of double or triple representation, but the framework allows that after signing a sporting contract, a player can authorize the club to pay the commission directly to the agents,
even if they're under 18.
Yeah. So in that case, we don't have that kind of problem, Ryan, because we only have with the minors the rep contract with the clubs. Okay. So it's different, the situation is why the values are so different between representing the player and representing the club. I'm just saying that after even represent a player, the payment can be made by the club. So this is in Portugal we have some difficulties with the tax authorities about this specific issue, because if the club is authorized to pay beyond the player, the tax authorities have the idea, the interpretation that these values needs to be treated like a salary, so it needs to pay a different tax and a social insurance. So this is I think in UK you have this kind of discussion with the tax authorities, and in Spain is more than that.
We've had quite a few questions and points about the minors, but for those guys asking, I'll come back to that at the end, because we've only got about 5 or 6 minutes left with Ricardo now, but I'll come back to that later on in the webinar.
Okay, I will just say briefly, we don't have on the framework a specific conflict resolution body. So I suggest to the agents to when they are negotiating the contracts to put the contract under a CAS on Lausanne or the Portuguese arbitration court. And we have mandatory elements on the contract. The special one and different from other countries is that we need to recognize the signature of the player. So this is important for the agents who comes outside from Portugal, because that recognition can be made by lawyers or legal entity or public entities, but this is very important because it's not valid, the contract, without this recognition. There is no cap in Portugal. The suggestion is the 5% that we already know, but there is no cap. I only want to share some 3 or 4 suggestions about what the agents, the foreign agents, needs to be aware when they are negotiating the contracts and the tax impacts of these situations for them and for their clients, the players. So the first one is negotiate whenever is possible. It depends the value of the player normally, but I can suggest to to put a penalty clause on an intermediation contract. In other countries, this is not how would I say, this is not a legal clause to put on an intermediation contract, but I think it's in Portugal is possible. Then I'll just say about using the arbitration court, Portugal or Lausanne. I think this is, I think it's very, very, very important. This is the exclusivity of the provision and the worldwide scope of the intermediation contract. And one specific thing in this regard, I advise always that the player authorize immediately on the contract that the intermediary can get some help or some work with other agents, because there is some legal procedures discussing if the player can breach the intermediation contract when his agent sign a sub-rep contract with another agent. I think this is an important thing to get in account on the intermediation contract. What can I say about this? There is no for an agent who gets the registration under the Portuguese Federation. That's no legal or tax obligations under the Portuguese law, but you and the players need to get some advice about the mainly on the first year of the sporting contract about the tax resident, because I always advise the agents and the players to put these values on net values and not gross values. But in the first year of the contract, it depends when the player comes. So this is a very, very important thing to get in mind. Some of the agents, after working in Portugal, they have a knowledge of and contact of the existing tax regimes in Portugal, the golden visa, a kind of non-dom, and the Madeira free zone. So normally some agents stays after 1, 2, or 3 deals in Portugal, stays and considers to work in Portugal and with these kind of regimes. Sometimes I just say that I advise that the individual image rights of the player should be reserved for him or for a company that he owns or a third party owns. I know this is discussable in almost of the European countries, but my suggestion is exclude the individual image rights from the sporting contract. And another advice that because sometimes we know and FIFA has this kind of how would I say purpose to avoid some circumvent contracts about the limitations of the intermediation contracts. Because if you look at the image rights contracts, they don't need to be only a 2 years duration. So in the future, I think we will get more and more image rights contracts. I'm just to finish this presentation. I think the most important thing is to be aware of these 3, 4, 5 issues and come to Portugal doing business.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. That was really, really interesting. There's 2 or 3 points there that I thought were really pertinent to the guys tuning in today. Tony, quite expensive to do business in Portugal. You know, there's clearly some other on costs as well in terms of having to get things translated into Portuguese. You know, the lack of a sort of online portal, no resolution body directly in Portugal as well.
Ryan, let me say just one thing.
Yep.
Sometimes the Portuguese federations authorize in English.
Oh, okay, great.
Normally, if you are registered under the EFAA.
Oh, okay, I understand.
So that makes the process more simple. But what says in the framework is on Portuguese language.
Fantastic, excellent. Ricardo, absolutely brilliant. Like I say, there's loads of questions there that we're going to come back to at the end. If I could just ask you to stop your share, that would be
okay, of course.
That would be absolutely brilliant. I can see that Roberto has joined us. Good morning, Roberto. But before we come to Roberto, Tony, just a very sort of quick reaction to Ricardo's presentation there, and I think we're going to do a poll as well, aren't we?
Yeah, thanks, right. Thanks, Ricardo. Excellent. That I really appreciate that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not dissimilar to what's going on in England and other countries. Yes, it is a little bit more expensive, but I think some of the key things that Ricardo has outlined there, that's an ongoing discussion that FIFA are having anyway, and I think obviously the protection of minors is an important issue. You know, but if you're going to do a big deal, I don't think you'd be too worried about €1,000 to register that deal. Obviously, we've got January just coming around the corner, and the window in Portugal will be open in January. I think it's the 5th of January it opens, and it'll be interesting to see what business gets done. I'm just going to launch a poll. Oh, there's plenty of business with Wolves, Ryan, obviously. You know, there's a pipeline going direct from Lisbon and Porto right into Wolverhampton. I'm just going to launch a poll. You know, I spoke at the start about the international transfers and how much money and how many players have gone, you know, out of Portugal this summer. And these are from FIFA. The numbers are from Transfer Market, so you'll have to forgive me. But I'll just launch the poll now. So if everyone can vote on it, it just gives you a flavour of some of the players that have left Portugal this summer and to which clubs. So I've just launched the poll, and I'm hoping the panelists can vote as well.
Oh, I don't think we can, Tony.
Really? Let me just see if I can change that. But if the guys can vote, yeah, that would be great. We've got two voting.
There seems to be. Oh, here we go.
So Tony, we cannot vote.
No, the panelists can't. No, just the attendees.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, we know what Patricia would be voting for. The best one would be Wendell to Zenit St. Petersburg. No, at 20 million euros. That sounds like a good deal to me, Patricia.
Yeah. Somebody's actually voted for Fabio Silva, which from Porto to Wolves, which surprised me. He's got off to a slow start at Wolves. Very young boy.
Wow.
Did well against Chelsea the other night, though.
Yeah, there's four deals done by Sporting Club there, going out of Sporting Club and into other countries, and 4 different countries, in fact, Spain, Russia, West Bromwich Albion. They maybe got the wrong Birmingham club that time.
It's not Birmingham, Tony. Careful.
Okay, so we'll end the poll there. I'll end the poll for the guys.
Yep.
I think it was Ruben Diaz at the top, the biggest money deal, but interesting.
Okay.
Sorry, Ryan. About these players is very interesting because here we have from 4 players from Sporting, and one was a trained player, homegrown player, Mateus Pereira. He's Brazilian and he's in Sporting since he was 12 years old.
Wow.
Oh wow! Wow.
Yes.
Fantastic.
And I remember it was very difficult to make the transfer because the limitations of FIFA. But he was with their family before the football. And it's very interesting because we have a player Wendel from Brazil, okay, and he was international Olympic in Olympic Games, and he moved to Zenit. Acuna, international from Argentina, as you know. And Vieto also international, but he played in Athletic Madrid. But this shows that Portugal is good to doing business.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Okay, fantastic. Ruben Diaz from Benfica to City wins it. He's certainly looking a good player. Let's move the conversation on and let's bring in Roberto from the European Football Agents Association. Roberto, good morning. How are you?
Fine, Ryan. Thank you very much. Busy times just before Christmas in this crazy lockdown situation here now in the Netherlands again. I think a bit more severe than where you are, but
yeah, no. So we're hearing. We hope you're all okay. Very keen to sort of hear from you briefly about what you've been up to. We touched on it with Ricardo. Ricardo, he mentioned that he'd seen something confidential. He wouldn't give it away. So maybe you can give it away, Roberto. Who knows? Where are we up to? Where are we up to? What do we know in terms of the changes that are going to go on? What can you share? What can't you share? When do you think we'll see action?
I can actually share a lot. First, I would just like to tell you that for the first time, I can actually use my wall painting in the house.
Fantastic.
It's Amalia Rodriguez, so if we have doing business in Portugal, I think it's the best background. It's my son. We have homeschooling.
The son gets to walk on path.
Yeah. Exactly. So schools are closed here, so that's the way it is in lockdown.
Oh, happy days.
You don't, Tiago. Sorry, I can't help that. That's the way it is. Okay, where are we now? There is an official letter that went out from EFAA to FIFA. FIFA wanted to include us in the consultation process. But as you are aware, EFAA has always made clear that there has not been a formal stage of consultation with agents, and that has been a friction between FIFA and agents all the time, because where FIFA needed our views in a proper consultation sense, I think we were unable to we wanted to have that official consultation phase, but we were unable to receive from FIFA, the go to be a real stakeholder in those consultancy discussions. So that was quite difficult to make clear to them that that was absolutely necessary to have a formal role before we could actually give our views. What we avoided from the beginning was that we would be used in a political sense, in the sense that EFA would have given his views on paper or informally, you know, and that would have been that would have resulted in a proper consultation from the view of FIFA. But from our side, we never had the chance to actually speak about those hot topics that we deem relevant. So there was always a back and forth situation. And in this third consultation phase, I think we were, when you look at the content of the regulations, you know, there for sure there were some issues that were quite interesting, as I spoke about last time that we were online. You know, I think that the move that FIFA made from limiting the fees, capping the fees on commissions, to opening the door more to fixed fees, and instead of limiting and capping the fees, more focusing on the limitation of speculation in the market. You know, I think that was personally, and on a personal note, I would say it seemed as if FIFA was moving towards a direction where they were actually looking more at the reality of the market and not saying, hey, we're limiting the fees as such, and we would enable payments, you know, under the table or whatever, because obviously you can't change an industry by just capping fees from one day to another. So the amounts that are being paid, you know, will not change drastically from one day to another, so people will find their ways. So I think they acknowledge that by saying, okay, let's look at a different form of capping commissions, in the sense of ending speculation or limiting speculation, and moving more towards a transparency system payment in relation to fixed fees. Now, personally, I could see that FIFA was moving towards a direction. However, what we can't, and that's just the legal reality, and every view of EFA or EFA member nation in relation to something else is less important. What the reality is that we have gathered some independent legal advice in relation to the regulations of FIFA as a whole, and have not been convinced that there are no antitrust issues in those regulations. Antitrust, firstly, in the sense that obviously, you know, FIFA is a governing body and now imposes, in a way, these rules and regulations in the market for players, agents, and players and clubs. So that's one issue that could impact on the antitrust issue. But even if you would look, at some justifications for these restrictions on competition, we have not been convinced. So that makes that if we would now, in what way or another, agree or collaborate with FIFA or show our views, that unfortunately, if there would be a liability deriving from these regulations, that there would be a chance that that liability could also extend to the members of EFA. You know, obviously, we can't do that. Now, whatever I think in a personal level or whatever you could think about the content of this regulation, if this is a good direction or not, you know, in a way that's sad that it impedes a further step in moving towards a proper consultation, I would say. We can't deny that. So that's why we would have to go back. We went back to FIFA by saying, listen, either we change this process of consultation and it's going to be a proper consultation, then we will be able to give our feedback to you in a proper way, because obviously our members have thought about it, and obviously, you know, in informal ways, I think we have expressed also some views in relation to issues that we deem interesting and relevant. You know, I've discussed it last time. I think it's a good thing that there would be a new licensing system, you know, in order to create at least some minimum levels of quality for agents and people aspiring to become agents. I think it's an interesting development that if you take the privacy and data privacy issues into consideration, it will be a good thing. There will be a clearinghouse where all the parties involved have a certain guarantee that payments can be made. You know, on those issues, I think there's little to no discussion if this is a good thing. Arbitration tribunal, we all know as lawyers here that it's really a pain in the neck that you will have to litigate in whatever country because it's unclear where you could go to seek for justice. And 9 out of 10 times agents and players include a cost clause in a contract, but it's really expensive, and the chances are unclear because it can be an ambiguous set of jurisprudence. So there were issues that were actually moving towards the right direction, but there are some key issues, as we know, the capping of fees, the dual representation issue, which can have a huge impact on the market. If there would be no change in the cap on commission issue, we sincerely believe that it can be a really big hurdle for people to enter into the market and for smaller agents to maintain in the market. So we can't be in a situation that we pretend to have been in a proper consultation with FIFA and that we give our views and FIFA would not do anything with it. And then there will be liability from a competition law perspective because we have ruined the market for aspiring agents by not saying no to those regulations. So in a way, we're a bit stuck between a rock and a hard place. On the other hand, I do believe that it should open also FIFA's perspective that if, and it's not like kindergarten discussions, this is serious business, because antitrust and competition law is not something that we made up yesterday. It's something that's fundamental to our market. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration, and we can't be too comfortable by thinking that these set of rules just create justifications per se because they tend to regulate a market that needs a certain form of regulation. There's still no carte blanche for sports governing bodies to regulate economic markets and economic sectors. And I don't want to go into too much theoretical detail now, but yesterday there was the International Skating Union decision by the European Court of Justice, and basically they confirmed the position of the European Commission in the sense that, in a nutshell, if it was International Skating Union was limiting the existence of independent competitions next to competitions organized by the International Skating Union. So basically they were using their monopoly on the market to limit other competitions to be organized next to the ISU competitions. And they gave a number of arguments, well, in a nutshell, also stating that we are the competition organizers. And if another party organizes a competition, the safety of the skaters could be at stake, and so on and so on. Without going too much into detail in that case, what it did make clear is that sports governing bodies do not have a carte blanche to organize or to limit access to a market just because of some sports specific reasons that they have come up with themselves. They might have a huge interest in saying that, and they might also be right till a certain extent, but to put that to our case, there's a very big chance that these regulations that FIFA has put down now as a draft will have an impact on competition law, and we're just not sure that it will be exempted, and that leads to risks that can't be taken.
Thanks, Roberto. Really interesting that.
I think
questions at the end, no doubt, Ryan.
Yeah, again, we've had some questions through, which we'll come back to. But it's obviously a developing situation. Clearly, a bit of a change in tone from Roberto there since we last spoke to him. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that cracks on.
Yeah, it's becoming a political issue, and that's sad. That's sad because we are moving. The discussion is shifting from the content to politics. And that's something that is something that could have been different if the consultancy phase in the beginning would have been taken from a different approach. So we don't want to create this sand in the between the wheels, or in the oil of the wagon. Yeah. But unfortunately, that's the way it is now, and we're waiting to get some feedback. So.
Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move it on. It's time to bring in Patricia. As I say, fantastic to have you here. I think before we get into the detail of what we want to talk to you about, it would be great just to hear a little bit about your experience, your career, because as I said at the top, you know, you are one of the most experienced individuals that have been practicing right at the top of one of the top clubs in Europe. So we're fascinated just to hear about your career as a starting point, please.
And Ryan, first of all, many thanks for the invitation. I'm real happy to be here with you and with the other participants. And that's the point. I would like to share some of my experience, and my testimony is personal. So it's not official position of the club. And I think it's very important to stress that. So I began with 24 years in Sporting, okay, 22 years ago, and I began as a trainee. And I was always crazy about football. For me, it's a real passion, and the club also. So it was a very tough process, as you can imagine, because you begin your career and you think it's a fairy tale, and the real world is complex. But it's our life. So I think I can share with you that in my career it's very important to keep at least two things in mind. So we've got to be switched on and always aware. Okay, so do not relax. And because this market is really voracious and it's tough. So sometimes it's not easy to deal with the big egos, you know, big personalities. And I think it's very important to be professional. And we are not here to make friends. Sometimes we make friends, it's good. But the main goal is to be professional, okay? And the other thing is that the things, the issues need to be resolved quickly, because there's a lot of misunderstandings, and the problems are not solved by themselves. I think it's real, and so if their situations remain unclear, and we know that our priority is to close the deal, to match the TMS. So it's like Cinderella. It closes at midnight or 11. So we must close the deal, because we must do it. It's our big priority. But after we, if some points are still unclear, I think it's a good way to try to solve them, because otherwise, you lose the spirit of negotiation. You mix negotiations. So I think it's a good advice for doing business in Portugal and in other countries. And so I would like to speak a little bit about the landscape in Portugal. Okay. Perfect. So Portugal now probably is the 6th league in Europe. We have very good players, as Tony showed, and for us it's very important to go to the Champions League. It makes a lot of difference, okay, in our budget, because you have a different stage to show the players and the fans, as you can imagine, dreaming with the champions. And so now we achieved the 6th place of UEFA ranking, and it will have consequences in the next sports season. So the next sports season for us, Portugal, we have 2 teams directly in the group stage, and the third one to the qualifying 3, and probably after the playoff. So to be in the group stage, you assure a minimum of 20 millions up to 45 millions. It depends also about the ranking of the club. Okay, for example, Porto probably is the club that receives more money, because the ranking in the last 10 years was very good. It was a new criteria implemented in 18 in UEFA competitions. So it's very important for us Portugal to go well in the UEFA competitions, and you know, for a club like Sporting, it was very good to and as Portuguese citizen to win the European Championship. It was a dream came true.
Yeah.
And for a club as Sporting, it was really good to see that 10 of 14 players that played the final were trained by Sporting. So
that's a lot. That's a lot, Patricia, isn't it? It says good things about the academy.
You know?
Talk about the academy. That says big things about the academy, yeah.
And now if you see the Sporting team this sports season, we have so many players from the academy, and it's very good to see how the mix is doing well. We don't know who wins the championship, okay? We are still in December, but the team is very competitive, and the mix between the young guys, the young boys from the academy, and the more experienced players, I think it's doing very well. So, as Ricardo said, Portugal is the third country, yes, as engaging more players in transfer, in international transfer, yes?
Yeah,
So,
true.
Yeah, third, yeah.
So I think it's and it's important to share with the other participants. Portugal is a really good stage and floor to talented players, okay? And we have a very interesting league, and probably, as I told you, after the 5 Super Leagues, probably is the most interesting league. And we have very good teams. We have Sporting, Benfica, Porto, Braga, very solid team in the last decade with playing very well, and probably is another candidate to the trophy. And we have another teams like Vitória de Guimarães, Famalicão is a very interesting team also, Paços de Ferreira and other teams. So what I suggest is also to follow the Portuguese league, because it's interesting. So I think it's important also to know the framework of regulations, because you have some limitations of loan players, okay, in Portugal. So in total, the clubs only can loan 6 players in the same division, okay, and only 1 player per team. And the other clubs that receive players on loan basis only can have 3 players, okay?
Okay.
So, but what I really believe that Portugal is a good stage, because we have a very good framework on competitive basis. For example, we can have like 60 players with contract with Sporting, Benfica, Porto, Braga, anyway, and we can have 3 teams, one at the Liga NOS, okay, one in our case the B team, it is in the 3rd tier, but we are trying to go to the 2nd league is professional. But for example, Benfica and Porto, they have a B team in the 2nd league, and we can have a under 23 team playing in the championship. So the reality is that we have almost 60 players linked with the same club, and if they are registered at the Portugal, they are able to have the opportunity to show the
Patricia, can I just ask you, because obviously we put up on the in the poll, you know, there was several Brazilian players, you know, that have gone, and you spoke about was it Mateus, who'd been at the club since he was 12. You know, what about the non-EU players? How does the club approach that particular issue?
I think it's a good question, Tony. So in Portugal, we don't have any limitations concerning the nationality of the player, okay? Wow. But we have the rule, the homegrown player rule as UEFA. But I think this is important to know the opportunities in Portugal, because we have limitations. The homegrown players, you must, in the third tier, you have more limitations than in the top, okay? In the top, you only must have 10 players registered in the squad, okay? You don't have to put on the pitch in the first league, okay, in the Liga NOS, a minimum number of homegrown players, only in the cup of the league. Okay. So you have the three. That's why I think it's Portugal. It's a good place to show the players, because you have the first, the Premier League, okay, and you have the second. It's professional league also, and you have some restrictions on the match sheet, okay, but the B teams have more restrictions than the other teams, and I think it's fair, okay. Yes. So let me only see my notes. So okay, so the B teams in the second league is the case of Benfica or Porto, and it was the case of Sporting from some years ago. We must have at the match sheet 10 homegrown players, okay? The second league. And the other teams in the second league must have in the match sheet only 3.
All right, okay. So Patricia, it sounds like the league system and the rules and regulations in Portugal are set up to help you to develop as many players as possible, because you're sending, Sporting are sending their sort of players, and the other big clubs in Portugal are sending their players down a few leagues to develop before then either bringing them back into the first team or whatever. It sounds like the perfect scenario for a perfect model for developing and selling players.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Sorry, just to make a point there, Patricia, because it's really interesting to hear what Patricia is saying, because guys, there's a big argument in England at the moment about the future of our academies. Is there a similar system put in here with B teams and C teams? And there's a lot of pushback from that, from fans of other clubs and other clubs, but it's clearly working in Portugal in terms of producing players. But the question I've got for you, Patricia, is what do other clubs think about playing Sporting's B team? Do they mind it? Is there pushback from other clubs?
Ryan, I think it's very important to improve the spirit of a team, and they are not belonging to the big team or to the under 23, because they trained a lot of times with the A team. Yeah, very important. The wallpaper of the director of the youth, of director of the academy, and they now and they are very linked with the main team. So it's very important to do not have misunderstandings, and the expectations. I think we must deal with expectation in the best manner, and do not put the player, if he trained twice or 3 times, he's not belonging for the A team. Okay. And what's interesting is that Tony, when he showed that table with a lot of transfers, what we see is that some very good players, as Vendel, as Vieto, international players, and Acuna, and they moved this summer. Vieto, it was later. I think it was September, and Vendel, it was the first days of September. But what is interesting is that it was an opportunity to the youth. Okay. Yep. And it's very important to have a coach as our coach that want to mix the youth and the experience. So I think it's very important to stress also that the Portuguese clubs are seller clubs as nature.
Yeah.
So we always need to release players and to receive the transfer fees to our balance accounts, and to not have big gaps. And we know that the UEFA system, the licensing system, the fair play regulations, the break even, it's very tough for the clubs.
Yep.
And sometimes is very difficult because we must have good results on the pitch, but we also must comply with some rules. We cannot have any debts with the players, with the coaches, with the clubs prior to 31 of December.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult. It's very difficult.
Patricia,
it's very difficult.
It's a sort of balancing act, isn't it? I suppose a balancing act, you know, developing young players, bringing them in, or even, you know, buying some players from smaller clubs in Portugal, or developing them yourself, and then obviously trying to be successful on the field and get up to win the championship, to win the league, and also to qualify for Europe. So then three things: the development of players, the qualifying for Europe, the pleasing your fans at home. It's a very difficult juggling act, isn't it?
Very, very difficult, real tough. And we must never forget that players are not commodities. So they have their own. So if we are happy, if they are happy, let's move forward and give an opportunity to other ones. But it's not easy because this is very sentimental industry.
Yes, absolutely.
Patricia, I wanted to ask, because despite the fact that Portuguese are traditional selling clubs, and British clubs know that, Portuguese clubs know that they need to sell to balance the books, how do Portuguese clubs still get such high values for players? You know, if I'm a buyer and I know you need to make these deals happen, but the value of the players coming out of Portugal, as we saw in that list, they're high. Is that just because of the competition for the player, or is it something that the clubs themselves are doing?
I think it's a mix of a lot of things. It is a competition because the law of offer and demand, okay? Sure. And also because we must have the contracts with a minimum of duration to negotiate and to be hard in the negotiation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a big challenge to renew the contract, and sometimes it's very difficult because that's a lot of money, and you must move forward, and sometimes is a success, okay, congratulations, but sometimes it will be sometimes like a nightmare because you renew the contract, you offer 5 years contract with a big wage, with signing fee, with a lot of good financial issues, and sometimes the player is very comfortable and he doesn't matter. So it's very difficult to deal with that, and to make these numbers. It is really difficult and stressing moments, and you know, this is sometimes is crazy industry, but you know, I prefer as a club, because I work for Sporting on exclusive basis. So forgive me because my opinion is like as in-house lawyer, okay?
Yeah.
And so I prefer to pay a big sum for a club because I know that it is in football. Must be invested in youth, in contract good players, to then contract a free agent, for example, and giving millions for a free agent. I prefer, but it's like old school.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. I really wanted to ask you, with the importance of European competition to the Portuguese clubs as well, what do the Portuguese clubs make of the proposed changes to European competitions like the Champions League? There's obviously sort of radical changes that are coming in. Premier League clubs here seem to be quite for it. We've seen the changes in the Champions League potentially mean changes to the domestic league here. What are the thoughts in Portugal? Do they see it as a good thing, or is it something you're worried about?
No, very worried, Ryan, and I probably and see, interesting, because it is the process, okay?
Yeah.
Because in 18 we have big changes. 15% of the group stage of Champions League came from the big four leagues.
Yeah.
For example, Italy doubled the clubs qualify directly to the group stage. They had 2+1 and returned to 4. But I think the changes made in 18, I understand the position of the bigger clubs, okay? So I think it's very important to keep them with us and to share, and it's the current roles, the ranking of the club is relevant, okay? And I understand that. What I think is that we must believe and we must keep the dream alive. And you see, like Atalanta, the last sports season, it was
Fantastic
football, okay?
Yep.
And what I think it's 21, we have 18 big changes, and 21 we have changes in Europa League, because we'll have a reduction to 32 teams, okay? And we'll have a new tournament, is the Conference League. And to be honest, for Portugal country is not a good one, okay? It's good to make happy the weaker clubs and the weaker associations. It's very political in my point of view. I think the ecosystem that we spoke before this pandemic, I think it's a close process for now. I think the ecosystem from UEFA with a pyramid, with relegations between the three tournaments, I think it will not be a reality. I think domestic leagues will remain the access to the European competitions, and I would like to not face with a Super League, with a close tournament as it happens in America of States, because I think the European model, it's different. So I really would like to do not have the Super League. But one detail about the next cycle, 21-24. The third classified in group stage of Champions League, he will not move directly to the Europa League.
Okay.
He will play a playoff. Okay. So it will be tougher to move forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's I mean, it almost seems like an inevitability that, we're on this slow march towards a Super League, and I think the vast majority of people feel uncomfortable about it. I think supporters feel uncomfortable about it. But I think, as you touched on, and also like Roberto touched on with the things that he's fighting towards, these things quickly just become political, don't they?
For me,
Yeah.
yes, very political. Yes, yes, yes. But political and also economical. Huh?
Yeah, of course, of course.
So but probably for the fans who really love football, I think they prefer the games of the Premier League instead to have a Manchester City PSG or
Yeah, and we've seen that within the attendances of the Europa League, haven't we? Right across Europe, it's not particularly well attended. Just a few quick questions to end with, Patricia. It was really interesting in the last one that we did of this, which was doing business in Spain. The Spanish clubs that had got quite a laissez-faire approach to paying agents. It took quite a long time for agents to get their money. Lots of siestas going on, I think, in terms of getting the invoices paid. What are Portuguese clubs like in terms of getting agents paid? Is it a bit speedier than your Spanish colleagues or similar?
Ryan, what I think, first of all, what I recommend to the agents is to contract a lawyer in Portugal. I think it's better because for us, for me and my colleagues, because now José Carlos and Bernardo and José Miguel, they are dealing directly with the agents. For us, is the same, okay? We deal with who is present with us. But I think it's very important to be advised by a lawyer. So, as I told previously, I think it's very important to make clear the details and write the conditions agreed and to have evidences of the services provided. Okay, I think it's very important to and to have evidences of the terms agreed. So we can sign a representation contract, but before it's usual to have a mandate.
Yeah.
Okay, so and it's very important to establish a deadline to that mandate, to establish a minimum amount to present the proposals, and to be clear that the board is free to accept or reject that proposal. So it's very important to, and we have, as you can imagine, we have guidances to make the contracts, and then some, and we are technicians. We are not parties, okay? So we depend of the board decision, but I think it's very important in negotiation to understand what is the really concern of the other party, okay? And identify the deal breakers also. I think it's very important to of course, we must know about law, of course, but we also I think it's very important to try to understand the other, okay? And not enter in the battle of egos, I, okay? Because what is really important, the deal to be concluded and to understand, as I told you, the big concerns from the others. Listen, it's not easy to me, and we know that we have some process with agents.
Oh, I think we've just lost Patricia.
But I think it's very important to try to make clear all the details, okay? And it's important to understand what is at stake also. So
okay, very good. Right, well, enough questions for me. There's lots of questions that I want to get through for the rest of the panel. Let's crack on with that. Patricia, thanks so much for your insight there. I'm going to come back to you with some questions now. The first question is to you, though, Ricardo, and it comes from George. The question is, what do we do with the image rights if we exclude it from the labour contract with a club are clubs still preparing separate image rights contracts, and do they have special taxation?
Yeah, Brian, it depends the value of the player and the value of the agent. This is, in fact, that happens because some players have separate image rights contracts with several clubs in Portugal. That is not a problem, okay? And some of them normally came from UK, went with companies who manage his image rights. So it's not a problem to sign a separate contract. The problem on image rights, the problem is not the image rights. The problem is a bad use of this situation. Mm-hmm. So in Spain we have a different level of problems with image rights, but not with the image rights as a concept or an asset, a patrimonial asset that needed to be managed. You look at the numbers of, for example, Cristiano Ronaldo and other super athletes, not only in sport. And we are not seeing investigations when the renewed winner of the Formula One gets his image rights on the Spain competition, okay? Because these kind of super athletes, the image rights are not only on the pitch and at that moment and that country.
Yeah.
So we need to get a different approach, an international approach, like other IP rights, like the patterns, the design. So I think it's only the beginning of a new discussion. But to answer the question, we can make a separate image rights contract with the clubs. Normally, the clubs won't say if you want to do that, but you need to push it, and it's possible and it's legal. I saw just one thing because I saw that on the chat.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Some agents do an intermediation contract with the minor under English law or Spanish law that allows a representation of a minor. Mm-hmm. I have some doubts about that, because when we don't have any party of the intermediation contract linked with one territory, I think we are circumventing the main objective of different rules on different countries. Mm-hmm. But I think probably in 1 year or 2 years we get this problem solved, because I think minors will be a mandatory rule, so I think it will be fixed. But some agents represent a player who plays in Portugal, and they have in mind, it's normal as a country like Portugal who sells a lot, to register this minor on the FA platform. Yeah. I know you will say that the platform asks us to put the name of the player, but in some cases, if you justify that you have an intention, a serious intention to move the player to UK on the next window, why not? Yeah. So sometimes that happens. I think it's discussable, but it happens. I just want to say about the cautions with the intermediation contracts with clubs. Sometimes the agents get another option, is like a mandate for a future sale with a contract. And then circumvene again the limitations of the intermediation contract, because it's a different contract, a civil contract, normally under the Swiss law. So, so for me, the tricky points to prevent the receive of the amounts is penalty clause, interest, and an arbitration court. I think this is the correct way to advise the agents in this situation.
Excellent. There's a follow-up question there, which I'm going to send to you privately, Ricardo. A question for you, Patricia. It's interesting that you mention ego. You know, I talk about the sort of big two drivers in the game being ego and paranoia. How do you deal with ego in your role, and the challenges that you over the years? You know, what has your strategy been for managing egos?
Ryan, for me, this is my point of view is professional, okay? But yeah. I really like to try to understand the other, okay? And the other party has a background, professional, personally, and for me, it doesn't matter, okay? Mm-hmm. For me, I try to understand what are their concerns, because I will not have a battle with them about egos, because I'm there to understand what are the deal breakers, what are the concerns, how can I present to the board the concerns of the other party, and also to show them that some clauses are not negotiable because I cannot do it. So, and I always try to show the best side, you know, and never give up about the negotiation, because we know it's so interesting. We had the case of the Gea, remember? You remember the Gea? It was a transfer between Real Madrid and Manchester United, and it was not authorized because the TMS was closed. And what I really think is that everything it's possible to make it happen again, because after that day, probably the club and the player and the agents were very nervous with communications, but a few days after, the show must go on, okay? And so I think it's very important always to try to build bridges and to find good solutions, and sometimes to know how we can touch that point that will change everything. So battle of egos, for me, it's not. I don't play that game, and also for me, it's I'm also always with the negotiation. I will not go to the trials, to the tribunals. I'm allowed it because I have the license, but I always try to solve. And sometimes it's impossible. Okay, it's not a miracle, but I always do my best to reach an amicable solution. And another thing, Ryan, I think we in a negotiation we are in very different points of view. Okay, and sometimes the email. It's tough, it is not nice, and it's so important to give a call and say, hey, come on, I'm saying that because it must be, but we always have solutions for everything. So I think it's very important to never forget the humanity, okay? And because sometimes if we have some mails, and you have that experience certainly, if we only, because attention, the emails are very important, no doubts about that. But it's very important to not forget the negotiation. We must build something, okay? And it's so easy to destroy. And if we don't have this kind of sense, sometimes it's broke, or it's more expensive, or
Well, we know all about negotiation here in Britain through Brexit and what not to do. So we're learning the hard way. Two very, very quick questions. If you could answer quickly, that would be absolutely brilliant. Ricardo, Peter asks that in Brazil, it seems that the contract is almost a standard 45% as a player's earnings comes from image rights. In Portugal, just very quickly, if a player was to have some of his wage paid in image rights, what would that percentage look like in Portugal? Oh, can't hear you.
Sorry, in Portugal, we don't have limitation. So okay. It's tougher.
Yep.
I prefer to get a clear instruction from the tax authorities when I advise a player or when I advise an agent.
Yeah.
But I look at the chat. One thing I think I need to clarify. I never said that the player is selling his image rights. Okay.
Yeah.
He only authorized the exploitation of his image rights for a certain period of time. I know under the English law that don't have any concept of image rights, we can make a license and then with a company owned only by the player. I know the situation, but I'm only talking on a continental approach with an exploitation of image rights, nor selling an individual right.
And about image rights, sorry, Ryan and Ricardo, I think it's good to make this conversation, because in the point of view of the club, the recommendation is not to give more than 20% on image rights, because probably we have difficulty to the costs will be acceptable by the tax authorities. So about image rights I think it's very important what Ricardo said. The collective image of the players are belonging to the clubs because the regime demands that. So usually in the club's perspective, for us, it's very important to have the use of the image rights as football player, okay? Because we have a shop, the fans, and for us it's very important to have their image as football player. So it is our contract says that, and it's very important, as Ricardo said, to not make an agreement with the player concerning the image rights. It should be a company not linked with their family, okay? Because the tax, they are aware with the net, and so the difference is, I think it's 25 to 50%, Ricardo, something like that.
It depends, but could be.
So it's a big difference, okay? So we must be careful, the clubs and also the player.
Sorry, just I'm not saying that, and I think this is the approach of the tax authorities, that when we came to Portugal, we make a certain structure. I think this is wrong. I think the way that the agents should deal with the players is doing that when they are younger. I know, because sometimes we negotiate with the clubs with an image right of a 16 or 18 player, and the clubs, almost all of them, says, look, the player don't have any image, and I say, okay, that's fine. We keep all the image rights for us, for the player, because if you don't understand the potentiality of this right, we keep it. So sometimes what I'm saying is, for all the foreign agents who comes to Portugal, is important to look at the way they are negotiating the values, and the rights, because we have a collective bargaining who stipulate the collective image rights are part of the salary is for that exploitation. But
Ricardo,
I agree with Patricia.
Yes, but in a club perspective, when because the legal regime and the collective bargaining states that the collective is from the club, but we also need to have individual as player, because I agree and I understand the point of view of Ricardo, but I think we should realize that a player is a famous player because he's in a team, because he wears a certain jersey. So I think we should also make a balance between your position and probably the position of the club to be with all the image rights and to not pay one more cent. I think it's very important also to understand that the clubs have a lot of costs to pay, and it's very the image of the player also be higher and higher and higher because the performance as a football player. So I think
it seems like a really interesting topic, especially against the last conversation that we had in Spain, where they were really trying to move away from image rights. They just didn't want to get involved with image rights at all. So it's really interesting that it's still there. I know we're pushed for time, but I do want to ask Patricia one more question, because I think it's really important for getting a sense of Portuguese clubs. You mentioned earlier about players coming over from Brazil at a very, very young age. You'll be aware of the changes FIFA have put in place about clubs signing players from overseas territories under the age of 18. This special relationship that Portugal has had with the likes of Brazil in the past. How do you think that will affect that moving forward?
But Ryan, it's very important to keep in mind that we have a lot of tradition for immigration, not linked with football.
Not linked with football, sure, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So it is very usual to have a lot of Brazilians player in Portugal because we have a lot of immigration.
Yeah.
And it was the case of Mateus. But anyway, we must have the prior authorization from the Commission for Minors at FIFA. And so we have different rules for European citizens with 16 or 17 years old, okay? And we must be careful with transfer of minors. So it must be not linked with football and risks about that.
Yeah, we've seen some English clubs get very close to the edge with how that is perceived. You know, people all of a sudden getting jobs in local supermarkets, and they just happen to have a wonder kid. Guys, we have run out of time. I really want to thank Ricardo and Patricia for all their insight. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. For me, I took some real interest in Tony and seeing how actually quite different it is to the Spanish market, which is obviously so close to Portugal. Yeah, some fundamental differences there. Tony, a few words from you, and then we'll talk about what the next one in this series will be.
Yeah, I can't believe we've gone through. Well, we're in injury time now, so we're in injury time in the webinar. And we haven't mentioned Jorge Mendes once, and I know he's the king of Wolverhampton Wanderers, Brian. But no, thank you so much, Patricia. And it's interesting. It was great today to have a very prestigious club representative on one side and a very prestigious lawyer on the other side, because I think that gives us a great balance, and it's a real. I really appreciate the insight that you've given us today. And we're moving next to the USA. So we've gone So part 4, this was part 3. We've gone from doing business in Germany, Spain, Portugal. So we're heading over on a boat from Lisbon, I think, to New York next. I think that's a long journey.
Yeah.
So the next webinar in this series is part 4, doing business in the USA. That could read the MLS because there's a couple of Canadian clubs in there as well. That's on Thursday, the 21st of January in the new year. Just make a note of those times because we're going to put it on in the afternoon in Europe so we can hit the East Coast of America as well. And other than that, it's just to say a happy Christmas, and we hope to see you guys in the new year.
Absolutely. Yeah, real thanks to Patricia, Ricardo, and of course Roberto as well. I've really enjoyed that. Some great feedback coming through on the chat there as well. So just to echo Tony's thoughts, really. Happy New Year, and I can't wait to see who Wolves are going to sign from Portugal in the new year. So I think we'll leave it at that. But thank you again, and everybody keep safe.
Okay, many thanks.
Thank you, and happy
New Year, better than 2020, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.